The scent of antiseptic and silent fear was the ambient perfume of my world. Tonight was no different. Rain sluiced down the plate glass window of the veterinary clinic, the drops drumming an erratic rhythm against the pane, a counterpoint to the monotonous tick of the wall clock. It was well past midnight. The pale, sterile light of the fluorescents gleamed off the stainless steel cages, where my silent patients waited for either recovery or release. I was Dr. Amelia Vance, and my universe was contained within these four walls, a sanctuary for innocent creatures brutalized by a cruel world. A shrill buzz from the front door sliced through the quiet. My heart jolted. No one came at this hour unless it was a dire emergency. Wiping my hands, still slick with the blood from a lengthy surgery on a hit-and-run dog, I felt my pulse thrumming in my throat. I unlocked the door, cracking it open to peer into the oppressive dark. The rain and shadows obscured nearly everything, but a tall, motionless figure stood just beyond the awning. He made no move to shelter himself from the downpour. He seemed a part of the night itself. A black umbrella hid his face, but his perfectly tailored suit and expensive leather shoes gleamed under the faint porch light. "We're closed," I said, my voice trembling more than I'd intended. "If this is an emergency, please—" "It is an emergency," a deep, cold voice cut me off. The tone held no panic. It held absolute authority, as if he were the one who commanded emergencies to happen. "Tell me, where are you watching from? Does your city hide its own underworld too? Drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe, so the Lord knows where you are, and may He bless your soul." He stepped inside without an invitation, collapsing the umbrella to reveal a face that could have been carved from marble. A sharp jawline, thick black hair impeccably swept back, and his eyes were as cold as the harshest winter. They saw through me, assessed me, and dismissed me all in the same instant. He was danger personified, a predator that had wandered into a haven for prey. In his arms, he held a large, cloth-wrapped bundle. He placed it on my steel examination table with a surprising, almost reverent gentleness. "It's injured," he stated. "Fix it." It was not a request, it was an order. I hesitated for a beat before unwrapping the cloth. Inside lay a peregrine falcon, one of the fastest creatures on the planet. It was magnificent, even in its dying moments. One of its wings was brutally fractured, and a fresh gunshot wound seeped blood onto its chest, staining the sleek feathers a dark, viscous red. The blood in my own veins turned to ice. "This is a gunshot wound," I whispered, horrified. "I'm aware of what it is," the man replied, a sharp edge of impatience in his voice. "I'm not paying you to diagnose the obvious. I'm paying you to save it." He placed a thick stack of $100 bills on the counter. It was enough to cover my rent for a year. I swallowed hard, forcing my focus onto the bird. My professionalism took over, a welcome shield against the terrifying man who stood just feet away. "It's lost a lot of blood. I'll need to operate immediately to remove the bullet, but its chances are slim." "Then make them better," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You will not leave this room until it is stable." I set to work, my hands trembling as I prepped my instruments. The man didn't leave. He stood in the corner of the room, a silent, dark monolith, watching my every move. His presence filled the small space, an invisible pressure that made the air thick and hard to breathe. Every beat of my heart seemed to echo his presence. Hours bled into one another. I worked on pure instinct, successfully extracting the small caliber bullet, stitching the wound, and setting the shattered wing in a delicate splint. The falcon was alive, but just barely. I moved it to a specialized heated incubator to stabilize its body temperature. It needs constant monitoring, I said, my voice hoarse with exhaustion, and a heavy course of antibiotics. Good, the man said, stepping out from the shadows. He looked at the bird, and for a fleeting, almost imperceptible moment, I saw another emotion in his eyes, something that resembled affection, or perhaps ownership. Then it was gone, replaced by the same chilling emptiness. You will come with me. I turned to face him, bewildered. Come with you where? I can't just leave my other patients. My man will see to them, he said dismissively, as if arranging for the care of a few sick animals was a trivial matter. This falcon requires your specialized attention. You will come to my residence and care for it until it has made a full recovery. I can't, I protested, a spark of defiance flickering through my fear. I have a life, a job. He crossed the room in 2 long strides, backing me against the cold, tiled wall. He placed a hand on the wall next to my head, caging me in. The scent of his cologne, a subtle, expensive mix of sandalwood and amber, enveloped me, suffocating and intoxicating all at once. You don't seem to understand, he whispered, his voice a soft, menacing caress. I am not asking. I am informing you of your new arrangement. He stared deep into my eyes, and I felt as if he could see every fear I had ever known. My name is Julian Thorne, and from this moment on, you belong to me. The words hung in the thick air between us, as cold and heavy as a death sentence. From this moment on, you belong to me. My mind raced, scrabbling for a clever retort, an act of defiance, anything but the terrified silence that was strangling me. But no words came. Fear was an effective gag. Julian Thorne. The name seemed to echo in the small clinic, carrying the weight of untold secrets and unspeakable power. I knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that I had no choice. To challenge him would only bring consequences I didn't dare to imagine. He seemed to read the surrender in my eyes. The barest hint of a smile touched his lips, a smirk devoid of any warmth. Wise, he murmured. Marcus will escort you. Pack what you'll need for a few days. Marcus, another enormous man in a black suit whom I hadn't even noticed enter, stood silently by the door. He had the solid, immovable presence of a rock wall. I glanced from Julian to Marcus, feeling like a mouse cornered by 2 very patient cats. With trembling hands, I packed a small bag with essential medical supplies, the antibiotics for the falcon, and a few personal items. Every movement felt surreal, as if I were watching a movie of someone else's life spiraling out of control. When I was ready, Julian lifted the incubator containing the falcon with that same surprising gentleness. Outside, the rain had eased to a persistent drizzle, but the air was still cold. A gleaming black SUV was parked at the curb, its engine purring with a menacing quietness. Marcus opened the rear door for me. The interior was absurdly luxurious, with soft leather seats and an almost complete silence that insulated me from the world I once knew. Julian sat in the front passenger seat, and the vehicle glided into the night, leaving my small, safe clinic behind. We drove through the deserted city streets, the streetlights streaking past like blurred watercolors. No one spoke. The silence inside the car was heavier than the silence in the operating room. I stared out the window, trying to memorize the route, but we soon entered a part of the city I didn't recognize. Private, tree-lined roads leading to enormous mansions hidden behind high iron gates. Finally, the SUV stopped before a modern glass and steel skyscraper that soared into the night sky like a shard of obsidian, It was a knife blade aimed at the heart of the city. The underground garage was eerily empty and surgically clean. A private elevator took us directly to the penthouse. When the elevator doors whispered open, my breath hitched. The apartment sprawled before me, a vast, minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the glittering city below. The decor was a stark palette of black, white, and chrome, with designer furniture that looked more like art installations than functional items. Everything was cold, precise, and controlled, just like its owner. "Put it here," Julian commanded Marcus, gesturing to a corner of the living room with the best view. "And have David run a full security sweep of the building." Marcus nodded and left. I was alone with Julian. "You'll stay in the guest suite," he said, his gaze fixed on the city lights, "not on me. It has everything you will require. Your task is simple. Keep that bird alive. Failure is not an option." He led me to a room that was just as opulent, with a king-sized bed and an ensuite bathroom that resembled a luxury spa. One wall was also made of glass, looking out onto a private, windswept balcony. I need to rest," I stammered, the exhaustion of the long night finally crashing down on me. "You will rest when I say you can," he replied coldly. "For now, check on the bird." Over the next few days, a strange, tense rhythm was established. I spent most of my time tending to the falcon. I named him Ares, after the god of war. It seemed fitting. Julian would appear and disappear like a phantom, sometimes just to stand and watch me work in silence, other times to ask terse, clipped questions about Ares's progress. He never spoke of himself, of his business, or of why a bird was so monumentally important to him. He had investigated me. I knew it for a fact. One evening, as I was feeding Ares, he entered the room and said, his voice flat, "Your father was an accountant, David Vance. Died in a single-vehicle accident 5 years ago. Your mother succumbed to cancer when you were a teenager." I went rigid, the forceps in my hand shaking. "How do you know that?" "I know everything about those who reside under my roof," he stated simply. "It's a necessary precaution." "It's an invasion," I hissed. "It's survival," he corrected. "A lesson your father apparently failed to learn." A chill snaked its way down my spine. "What do you mean by that?" He just shrugged, his eyes unreadable. "Accidents are not always accidental, Dr. Vance." Those words planted a seed of dread and suspicion in my mind. My father's death had always been a raw wound. The police had ruled it a collision caused by a drunk driver who had fled the scene, never to be caught. But there had always been unanswered questions, details that didn't quite add up. I began to watch Julian more closely, trying to piece together the puzzle of who he was. The men in black suits were a constant, discreet presence. The phone calls in clipped, angry Italian. The fact that no one entered or left the penthouse without his explicit permission. This was no mere wealthy businessman. This was another world, an underworld that operated by its own brutal set of rules. One night, sleep eluded me. Julian's words about my father replayed in my mind. I crept from my room, drawn toward his office, where a sliver of light escaped from under the door. Pressing my ear to the solid wood, I could hear his low voice. "Falcone is getting bold. He thinks David Vance's death tied up all the loose ends. He doesn't know what Vance left behind." Falcone. David Vance. My father. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stumbled back from the door, my mind reeling. Julian knew something about my father's death. He wasn't just speculating, he knew. And somehow I was caught in the middle. The falcon wasn't the real reason I was here. Ares was just the pretext. I was a pawn. Or maybe I was the key. The realization struck me with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't a hired veterinarian. I was a piece on a lethal chessboard, and I didn't even know the rules of the game. Every breath I took in this luxurious penthouse tasted of deceit. My care for Ares, the magnificent falcon, now felt like a well-orchestrated distraction, a way to keep me close, to keep me under control. My initial fear began to curdle into a cold, simmering rage. Julian Thorne had stolen my freedom, invaded my past, and now it seemed he held the secrets to my father's death. I resolved to find out the truth, no matter the cost. I began my own subtle investigation. By day, I was Dr. Amelia Vance, the dedicated professional. I tended to Ares with meticulous care. The bird's health was improving dramatically. He was beginning to stand on his perch, his sharp eyes following my every move. But when night fell and the apartment sank into a hushed stillness, I became a ghost, exploring my gilded cage. I knew Julian's office was the nerve center of his operations, but it was protected by a security system I had no way of bypassing. I noticed a pattern, however. Every Tuesday evening, Julian left the apartment for several hours. Marcus, his ever-present bodyguard, would remain, but he typically stationed himself at the main entrance, leaving the rest of the penthouse less actively monitored. This was my chance. The next Tuesday, minutes after Julian departed, I made my move. I spilled a glass of water near Ares's incubator, creating a pretext to summon Marcus. "I'm so sorry. I've spilled water near the bird's heating unit. I'm afraid it might short-circuit." Marcus, his face a mask of bored annoyance, came to inspect the minor spill. The moment his back was turned, I slipped out of the room and moved silently toward Julian's office. I had watched him enter the code countless times. I wasn't certain, but I had memorized the first 4 digits. Taking a deep breath, my fingers trembling, I keyed them in. The door remained locked. I tried a few variations for the last 2 digits. Nothing. In desperation, I stared at the keypad. And then I remembered something. The way Julian looked at Ares, his strange, fierce attachment to the bird. Ares was a peregrine falcon. His birthday? No, too obvious. Maybe a date that was significant to his family? I recalled a snippet of a conversation I'd overheard, him speaking of my father's legacy. Using my phone, I quickly searched for Julian's father, Antonio Thorne, an enigmatic figure who had died a decade ago. I found his date of death, October 27th, 1027, 1027. I tried the last 4 digits as 1027. The keypad gave a soft chime, and the heavy door clicked open. My heart pounded. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me. The office was dark and cold, lit only by the distant city lights. It was sparsely furnished, but everything in it screamed power. I went to his desk, a massive mahogany slab, and began to search. I didn't know what I was looking for. A file, a notebook, anything with my father's name on it. In an unlocked drawer, I found it. A thin file labeled D.V. Falcone. Inside were photocopies of bank transfers, ledgers, and a few photographs. One was of my father shaking hands with a portly, smirking older man. On the back, a caption read, "David Vance and Salvatore Falcone." Falcone, the name I had heard Julian speak. As I sifted through the documents, a dark story began to unfold. My father wasn't just an accountant. He had been working for the Falcone family, a rival crime syndicate to the Thorns. He had been their money launderer, but the last few documents showed something different. It appeared my father had siphoned a large sum of money into an unknown account. He had betrayed the Falcones. And then I saw the report from a private investigator. It detailed my father's car crash. The brake lines had been expertly severed. It wasn't an accident. It was an assassination. I sank into Julian's chair, the file slipping from my nerveless fingers. My father was a criminal, and he had been murdered for it. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks. My entire life, my memory of my father, was built on a lie. A soft click from the door made me jump. I spun around, and Julian was standing there, his face an unreadable mask. He didn't look surprised to see me. He simply glanced at the scattered file on the floor, then back at me. "I was wondering when your curiosity would get the better of you," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You knew," I whispered, my voice raw from unshed tears. "You knew all of it." "I knew your father worked for my enemy," he said. "I knew he stole from them, and that they killed him for it." "Then why bring me here?" I cried, my grief twisting into fury. "To torture me with the truth." "Were you involved?" He stepped fully into the room, closing the door. "If I had been involved, you would not be here to ask that question." He picked up the file. "Your father stole something more valuable than money from Falcone. He stole a ledger, the proof that could bring down his entire empire. Falcone has been searching for it ever since your father died. He believes Vance passed it to someone before he was killed." He paused, his dark eyes locking onto mine. "He believes that someone is you." It all clicked into place. The abduction, the surveillance, the falcon, it was all part of an elaborate play. "You think I have the ledger?" I said, the realization dawning. "You brought me here to force me to give it to you." "Initially, that was the intention," he admitted without apology. "But things have changed." "How have they changed?" I scoffed. "I've watched you," he said, his voice lowering. "I've seen the way you care for Ares. There is a gentleness in you, a strength. I have not seen it in anyone. You are not like your father. You are innocent in all of this." "I don't need you to tell me what I am," I said bitterly. "No," he agreed, "but you need me to tell you the danger you are in. Salvatore Falcone is a monster. He will stop at nothing to get what he wants. He began having you followed weeks ago. The accident with the dog you saved the night I found you was no accident. It was a warning from them, a way to see who might come to your aid." The room began to spin. "That's impossible." "Falcone is about to make his move," Julian continued, his voice urgent. "He will come for you. And he will not be as hospitable as I have been. You have a choice to make now, Amelia. You can continue to hate me, to believe I am your enemy, or you can accept the truth that I am the only thing standing between you and Salvatore Falcone." He moved closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Trust me. Let me protect you." A choice. There it was again. An impossible choice in a world I didn't belong to. Trust my captor, a ruthless mafioso, to protect me from someone even worse. But as I looked into his intense, dark eyes, I saw something beyond the cruelty. I saw cold, hard resolve, and I knew he was telling the truth. I was being hunted, and Julian Thorne was my only hope of survival. "I don't have the ledger," I said, my voice a shaky whisper, my defiance crumbling in the face of the brutal reality. "I didn't even know it existed until tonight." "I believe you," Julian replied, and strangely, I knew he meant it. "But Falcone doesn't. To him, you are a loose end, the last link to your father's betrayal. He will not let you be." The air in the office grew thick, suffocating. The glittering city outside the glass wall no longer looked beautiful. It looked menacing, filled with invisible threats. My gilded cage had become my only fortress. "What do I do?" I asked, feeling a wave of helplessness wash over me. "You will remain here," Julian said definitively, "and you will help me figure out where your father hid it." "How can I? I don't know anything." "You knew him," he countered. "You knew his habits, his secret places. A ledger like that is not something he would have left in an obvious location. It has to be hidden somewhere that would only make sense to him or to you." Over the next few days, the penthouse transformed into a war room. Julian and his men worked tirelessly, dissecting my father's life. They had everything: financial records, call histories, his daily schedules from the last month of his life. It was agonizing to see my father's life laid bare and analyzed by these strangers. But I cooperated, searching for any anomaly, any small detail that could be a clue. My relationship with Julian shifted. The fear was still present, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was now mingled with a reluctant dependency and a growing curiosity. I saw moments when the ruthless mafia boss receded. I saw him standing by the window for hours, staring down at the city with a profound melancholy. I saw the way he spoke to Ares, his voice losing its usual icy edge. "Why a falcon?" I asked him one evening, as we watched Ares tear into a piece of raw meat. He was silent for a long moment. "My father gave him to me," he finally said. "He said the thorns must be like falcons, powerful, fearless, and with a vision no one else possesses, always above everyone else, looking down." He paused. "He was with me when my father died." It was the most personal thing he had ever shared. It made him human. We reviewed all of my father's assets: our old family home, long since sold, his office, cleared out, even a small boat he once owned. Nothing. "It has to be there, Amelia," Julian said, frustration evident in his tone. "Think. A safe place. A personal place. Somewhere Falcone would never think to look." I closed my eyes, casting my mind back through the years. I thought about the weekends we spent together. My father was a lover of history and old books. The library was his sanctuary. "The Central Library," I said suddenly. "He had a private research carrel there. He spent hours in it, said it was the only place he could truly think." Julian's eyes lit up. "David, check the records for the City Central Library. Find any carrels registered to David Vance." Minutes later, David returned. "There is one, sir. Carrel 3B in the Special Archives section. The lease is still paid annually, through an automatic payment from a defunct account." "We're going there," Julian declared. "Falcone could be watching the library," I warned. "Which is why we won't be using the front door," he said with the ghost of a smile. That night, we moved like shadows, Julian, myself, and two of his guards navigated a series of underground service tunnels I never knew existed, emerging in the basement of the library. The air smelled of old paper and dust, a stark contrast to the sterile atmosphere of Julian's penthouse. The archives section was a maze of towering shelves. We found Carrel 3B. It was secured with an old-fashioned combination lock. "What's the code?" Julian asked. I shook my head. "I have no idea. Birthdays, anniversaries, anything significant." I tried every combination I could think of. Nothing worked. Time was running out. We couldn't stay here long. "Step back," Julian said. He motioned to one of his men, who produced a small kit. In less than a minute, there was a soft click, and the lock sprang open. Inside the carrel was nothing but a stack of old books on local history. No ledger. Nothing that looked important. There's nothing here, I said, my voice filled with disappointment. Julian didn't answer. He was holding one of the books, a thick history of the city's founding. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its weight. Then he did something strange. He opened the book to the middle, and instead of turning pages, he took a small, sharp knife and sliced along the inside edge of the spine. Inside, a hollowed-out cavity had been expertly carved into the pages, and nestled within it was a small, black, leather-bound ledger. He had found it. He pulled it out, a triumphant smirk flashing across his face. But the smirk vanished as quickly as it came. "We have company," he said softly. I heard it then, the soft but distinct sound of footsteps at the end of the aisle. "Marcus, David, the back exit." "Get her out of here," Julian ordered, pressing the ledger into my hands. "Do not let them get this." "What about you?" I asked, my heart seizing. "I'll buy you some time," he said. He pulled a silenced pistol from inside his jacket. "Now go, Amelia." Marcus grabbed my arm and pulled me along. We ran through the dark aisles, the muffled pops of gunfire erupting behind us. Each shot made me flinch, a silent prayer forming on my lips for the man I had, only days ago, considered my greatest enemy. Adrenaline, sharp and metallic, flooded my veins as we ran. Marcus and David moved with a practiced efficiency, one in front of me, the other behind, forming a moving diamond of protection. The library's labyrinthine corridors seemed endless, each turn a potential ambush. The gunfire had ceased, and the ensuing silence was somehow more terrifying. Where was Julian? Was he alive? The small ledger in my hand felt as heavy as a block of lead. This was what my father had died for, what Julian was risking his life for. We reached a service exit at the rear of the building. David carefully cracked the door, peering into the dark, damp alley outside. "Clear," he whispered. Outside, another black sedan was waiting, engine idling. The moment we were inside, the car peeled away, tires squealing on the wet asphalt. "Where are we going? We have to go back for him," I pleaded, turning to look at the receding library. "The boss's orders were to get you to safety," Marcus said, his voice a flat, unemotional monotone. "We follow orders." "What safety? He's back there alone, fighting." I trailed off. "The Falcones," David finished. "The boss knows what he's doing." But I wasn't so sure. For the first time, the thought of a world without Julian Thorne in it filled me with a hollow, aching dread. The car took us to a nondescript warehouse in the city's industrial sector. Inside, it had been converted into a high-tech safe house, complete with surveillance monitors and neatly racked weapons. It was the antithesis of the penthouse's cold luxury. This was Julian's real world, a world of violence and survival. We waited. Each minute stretched into an eternity. I paced the concrete floor, the ledger still clutched in my hand. Marcus and David were silent sentinels, their tension palpable. After more than an hour, another car approached. The warehouse door rolled up, and Julian stepped inside. He was alive. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. He was uninjured, but his suit jacket was torn at the sleeve, and there was a fresh, angry gash on his cheekbone. He looked exhausted, but his eyes burned with a dangerous light. He looked at me, then at the ledger in my hand. "You're safe," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Thanks to you," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "They were waiting," he said, his voice tight. "There's a traitor in my organization. Someone tipped Falcone off that we were going to the library." He took the ledger from my hand and opened it. The pages were filled with columns of coded numbers and names. To me, it was meaningless, but to Julian, It was a map to the dark heart of the Falcone Empire. "This is it," he murmured. "Everything. The offshore accounts, the paid-off politicians, the shipping manifests. Your father was a very thorough man." He looked at me. "He did the right thing in the end, Amelia. He tried to fix his mistakes." Those words were a small balm on my grieving heart. "What now?" I asked. "Now we end this," he said, a cold finality in his tone. "Falcone knows we have the ledger. He won't back down. He'll throw everything he has at us. We have to strike first." The next 2 days were a whirlwind of activity. Julian used the information in the ledger to systematically dismantle Falcone's operations, intercepting shipments, freezing accounts. A war in the shadows was being fought across the city. I remained at the safe house, an unwilling spectator. Julian rarely slept. He spent hours in front of the monitors, issuing orders, planning his strategy. I would bring him coffee, and sometimes he would talk to me, explaining his moves as if I were a general in his army. I saw another side of him, the brilliant strategist, the leader who commanded the absolute loyalty of his men. On the second night, he came into the small room where I was staying. I was sitting on the cot, unable to sleep. "You should rest," he said. "I can't," I confessed. He sat on the edge of the cot, keeping a respectful distance. "When this is over, I will take you anywhere you want to go. A new life, a new identity. No one will ever bother you again." "And you?" I asked. He looked away, his profile stark against the dim light. "I will remain here. This is my fight." "Julian," I began, but I didn't know what to say. He turned back to me and I could see the weariness in his eyes. "You do not belong in this world, Amelia. I was wrong to drag you into it. But now I will get you out." Before I could respond, his phone rang. He answered, and his entire body went rigid. "Where? When?" he demanded. He hung up, his face a thundercloud. "What is it?" "Falcone," he said. "He's taken someone important to me." "Who?" He hesitated. "An old family friend. He wants to make a trade, her for the ledger." "You're not going to do it," I said. "I have no choice," he replied, his voice heavy. "I do not abandon my people." "It's a trap," I cried. "He'll kill you both." "I know," he said grimly. "But it's a trap I have to walk into." He stood to leave, but I was on my feet, blocking his path. "Don't go, please." He looked down at me, and for a moment his icy facade cracked. He reached up, his fingers gently tracing my cheek. "Amelia," he whispered, and then he bent his head and kissed me. It was not a gentle kiss. It was filled with desperation, anger, and an emotion I didn't dare name. It was a goodbye. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with resolve. "Lock this door after me," he said. "Do not open it for anyone but me." And then he was gone. I did as he said. I locked the door. And I waited in the darkness, praying for a murderer, a ruthless mafia boss who had somehow become my protector, my jailer, and the one person in the world I could not bear to lose. The 4 walls of the warehouse became my prison, each tick of the clock a new form of torture. I had no idea where Julian had gone, only that he was walking into a death trap. I paced the cold concrete, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Marcus and David had gone with him, leaving 2 different guards stationed outside. I was utterly alone with my thoughts. I couldn't just sit here. I had to do something. My eyes fell on the surveillance monitors Julian had left running. Most showed feeds from around the city, but one displayed a GPS tracking map. 3 green dots were moving: Julian, Marcus, and David. They were heading toward the old port district, a notorious Falcone stronghold. And then I saw it. A small detail in the ledger I had glanced at earlier. As Julian had been deciphering it, he'd pointed to an address, that same port district. Next to it was a handwritten note from my father. Insurance. My father had anticipated something like this. He had left a failsafe. I had to get there. But how? The guards would never let me leave. I scanned the warehouse. It was filled with equipment, but nothing useful for an escape, until my eyes landed on the medical cabinet. I was a veterinarian. I knew pharmacology. I quickly mixed a powerful sedative, a dose I would use for a horse, into 2 bottles of water. My heart hammered as I walked to the door, my face a carefully constructed mask of panic. "Please," I said to one of the guards, my voice cracking. "I need some air. I think I'm going to be sick." He eyed me suspiciously, but my panic must have seemed genuine. He spoke into his radio, then cracked the door. 5 minutes. That's it." "Thank you," I said, handing him and his partner the water bottles. "You must be thirsty. Julian always keeps water here." They took them without a second thought. In their world, the threat always came from the outside, not from the small woman they were assigned to protect. I waited. 10 agonizing minutes later, both men were slumped over in a deep, chemically induced sleep. I took the keys to one of their cars and drove like a mad woman toward the port, my soul screaming into the void. I had no plan. I only knew that I could not let Julian die. The port district was desolate and menacing, rusted warehouses looming out of the night fog. I found Julian's car, abandoned near one of the larger structures. I killed my headlights and approached on foot. I could hear voices from inside. I crept to a grimy window and peered in. The scene inside sent a spike of pure terror through me. Julian was on his knees, his hands bound behind his back. Marcus and David lay unconscious nearby. Facing him was Salvatore Falcone, the man from the photograph with my father. He held a gun, aimed squarely at Julian's head. "Where's the ledger, Thorne?" Falcone snarled. "Somewhere safe," Julian replied, his voice impossibly steady. "Kill me and you'll never find it." "Oh, I'll find it," Falcone sneered. "After I've paid a visit to your little veterinarian friend. My men are on their way to the safe house right now." A cold dread gripped my heart. But then I remembered my father's note. Insurance. I scanned the warehouse. It was filled with shipping crates. But in one corner, there was a small, grimy office. I had to take the chance. I found an unsecured side entrance and slipped inside, moving through the shadows. I made it to the office and began searching frantically. In an old filing cabinet buried under a pile of manifests, I found a metal box. Inside was a tape recorder and a set of documents. My father had recorded every single conversation he ever had with Falcone. This was it, the undeniable proof. But it was useless if we were all dead. I looked back through the office window. Falcone was losing his patience. "Last time, Thorne. The ledger." I had to create a diversion. My eyes landed on an old, sparking electrical panel on the wall. I grabbed a loose iron pipe, and with all my strength, I hurled it at the panel. There was a shower of sparks and a loud bang. The lights in the warehouse blew out, plunging the scene into near-total darkness, lit only by the faint moonlight filtering through the dirty skylights. In the chaos, Julian moved. Even bound, he was as fast as a viper. He kicked out with his legs, sweeping Falcone's feet from under him. Gunshots erupted from all sides. I ducked behind some crates, my heart hammering. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw that Julian had freed himself and was fighting Falcone's men hand to hand. He was a brutal, efficient fighting machine. But Falcone had recovered. He scrambled for his gun and aimed it at Julian, who was occupied with two other men. Without thinking, I burst from my hiding place. "No!" I screamed. The sound distracted Falcone for a fraction of a second. It was all Julian needed. He disarmed one of his attackers and threw the man into Falcone, sending them both tumbling to the ground. I ran toward them, my mind a blank slate of pure, primal instinct. I saw the gun on the floor. As Falcone pushed the henchman off him, he reached for it. But I was faster. I snatched it up. It felt heavy and cold in my hands. Falcone looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief, then narrowed with rage. He lunged for me. I pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening. Falcone staggered back, a look of surprise on his face, before collapsing to the floor. Silence descended upon the warehouse, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. Julian finished off the last of the henchmen and came to my side. He gently took the gun from my trembling hands. He looked from Falcone's body to me, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly against his chest. I buried my face in his suit, inhaling his scent, and finally let the tears come. "You saved my life," he murmured into my hair. "You saved mine first," I sobbed. He held me until the shaking stopped. He then led me out of that warehouse of death and back into the night. We didn't talk. There were no words for what had happened. When we returned to the penthouse, the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. Ares greeted us with a sharp cry from his perch. Julian led me to the glass wall overlooking the city. "It's over," he said. "With the ledger and your father's recordings, the Falcone Empire is finished. It will be dismantled from the inside out." "What about us?" I asked, my voice small. He turned to face me, taking my hands in his. "I made you a promise, Amelia, that I would get you out. I can still do that. A new life anywhere you want. I will arrange it." I looked into his eyes, the coldness gone, replaced by something deep and intense. I thought about the quiet, safe life I once had. It was gone forever. The things I had seen, the things I had done, they had changed me. "What if I don't want to go?" I whispered. A flicker of surprise, of hope crossed his face. "This world, it's dangerous, it's violent." "I know," I said. "But it's also the only place I've felt truly alive in a very long time, and it's the only world that has you in it." He searched my face, looking for any sign of doubt. Finding none, he pulled me close again, this time with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "I told you that you belonged to me," he said, his voice a low, possessive rumble. "I was wrong." He tilted my chin up, his gaze locking with mine. "We belong to each other." And as he kissed me, with the dawn of a new, uncertain day breaking over the city, I knew he was right. I had been dragged into his darkness, but together we had found a sliver of light. Our story was not a fairy tale. It was a brutal, beautiful, and dangerous reality. And it was just beginning.